Well, hello, and welcome to Des. I think I'm keeping track. Season 2, episode 18, bonus episode. How are you, mate?
I'm good. And how's yourself?
Oh, listen, I tell you, I'm feeling like I'm missing a leg, right? I mean, we still don't have Andy back, so you and I are having to hold the fort. I mean, we do anyway, right? We're the only real hardworking ones on the show, so. But I do feel like I'm missing a leg at the moment, but that's okay. Now, Des, last week the spinning wheel of death landed on a pretty open-ended topic: LTIFR and TRIFIR, and we kind of started sort of gas bagging about that, and we are now looking at our bonus episode where we've brought in a special guest. Now, are you sitting down, Des? Are you sitting down, mate?
I am. Yeah. What are you going to hit me with?
Mate, I tell you what, have I got a special guest for you? Like, I know there's going to be. I need you to just let me do the talking. I know you've been working on your communication stuff in your presentation. I'm just nervous you're going to say something in a bit of a fanboy moment. Because have I got a deal for you?
Oh dear. What's happened? What have you done?
Mate, the special guest, I tell you, you've referenced this man, I think a number of times actually, in some of our conversations. So super excited. I've been working beavering away in the background, mate, and I am super excited to. Like, who cares about who else is listening to this? I'm super excited to have done this for you, Drew. Not Drew. You're Des. It's Drew Rae. How are you, Drew?
G'day, Brenton. G'day, Des. How are you doing?
G'day.
Mate, see, you ask and I deliver, right? You said, find me somebody that knows what they're talking about because you clowns don't know. And so I found you, Drew. And I believe, so Drew's our special guest. How are things going? And where are you dialing in from today, Drew?
So this is Tambourine Mountain, just south of Brisbane on the east coast of Australia.
Nice.
I'm a little bit worried about this idea that you think I'm someone who knows what I'm talking about. I understood that the brief was that you like to rant about safety things that annoy you, and that's what I was here for too.
Well, Drew, to be fair, we set the benchmark very low, so it doesn't take much to know more than us, to be fair. Now, again, I've just got to thank you for responding to an unsolicited random message on LinkedIn to join us today. And Des, I guess we spoke about a bit of a conversation Drew's already had on this. Do you want to kind of just take us back to that moment last week, Des, around why we thought we'd reach out to Drew and what got the conversation started?
Yeah, sure. So in last week's show, we talked about the statistics and metrics associated with injury lag indicators. And there was an episode of the Safety at Work podcast, of which Drew is a host. Episode 55 talked about the validity of those statistics in a particular paper that discussed whether those numbers are valid and what makes them valid, what makes them invalid. And it was a really insightful episode on the podcast. And so it's a very relevant resource and a very relevant person to be talking to today.
Oh, there we go. We even got a plug-in for the Safety at Work podcast there. So if you want to listen to some people that actually know what they're talking about, maybe head on over to that one. So Drew, mate, when I mention the words, well, it's not even a word, right? They're acronyms at the moment. LTIFR and TRIFIR. I mean, what comes rushing into your head when you hear those acronyms?
What immediately rushes in is this term recordable and how much that term hides what we're actually doing with safety statistics. So recordable is not even a objective thing. It's a decision that we make, a binary decision about something bad that's happened that we already know about. We then make this weird decision, is it going to count or not? And that decision, hidden in the midst of what looks like this scientific calculation that divides things by 100,000 working hours and puts things up in multiple decimal places, is ultimately just the biggest perverse incentive in all of safety management. Who decides what counts? How do they decide? And what are their incentives to act around that decision?
I mean, you've already taken the level of this show to a whole other level, because we didn't get anywhere even near that last week. And I mean, one of the things you talked about, a couple of things there, like who decides what's counted and stuff. I mean, do you have you had much to look into the history of these figures and where they came from, and how somebody sometime a while back decided that these were the things to be looking at?
So I don't want to do too much of a deep dive here. I have a PhD student who works in my team called Kevin Geddert, who you're going to have to meet and you're going to have on the Circus of Safety, because Kevin has drilled down into what he thinks is the moment that this started. And I keep having to tell him to take out this page-long description of how he knows exactly who is to blame for TRFIR. But the big point that he emphasizes is that it started with a dual measurement of frequency and of severity. And those two things somehow got detached during the history because severity was just a bit too hard. And that's ultimately what's to blame for a lot of safety practice, is that split that we started just being concerned about how many things to count and putting this binary classification about whether they'd count or not, instead of understanding that we have this full range of things, from minor things to multiple fatalities. And maybe they have different causes and require different management techniques when you're looking at car crashes versus hand injuries versus mine explosions. Maybe those things aren't actually each one when we count whether they're recordable or not.
Yeah, wow. I mean, so you sent me down a rabbit hole here now. I mean, really, and Des will pull me back in a line if I start getting a little bit kind of excitable. You spoke about the fact that it started one way and potentially got detached along the way, and I guess I want to go down that road a little bit. I mean, in your experience, how often does that happen in safety, right? So something maybe was invented, decided, come up with, whatever the case may be, with the greatest of intentions, right? And then over time, for whatever reason, it evolves, misunderstandings, misinterpretations of things. And then the next, I guess in New Zealand, we go neck minute, it's morphed into something that's actually no longer relevant and nothing like what it was meant to be.
Yeah, this isn't just safety. This is organization behavior. Good ideas, the moment we try to put them down on paper and standardize them and put a formula to them, become bad ideas.
Yep.
You have a really nice chat with someone in the corridor and you think, gosh, I got some information passed here. But don't you tell your organization that, or they will try to say, how can we have more conversations in the corridor? What's a good KPI for corridor conversations? What's the procedure for who's meant to be involved in the conversations? And 2 years later, there are audits about how many minutes you're spending standing around. And someone's forgotten that the conversations were good things, not things to reduce by reducing the minute count on your corridor conversations.
So true. I mean, it's amazing, Drew. It's almost like we're visionaries on this podcast, because we don't write anything down. We don't plan anything. So what you're saying is we're actually on the right trajectory to success and greatness. Was that what I'm picking up?
You're laughing at the look I'm giving you here, which I don't think is going to translate to a podcast audience. So you've probably at least seen Sid Decker's book, The Safety Anarchist. And he's one of those people who genuinely believes in anarchism, this idea that, don't try to guide people, and the emergent behavior of clusters of people will be more rational than the systems we put in place around them. I'm an engineer. I dream of the utopia where we have good systems of rules and processes. And I just think that everyone's bad at it.
This conversation is definitely going on a whole different tangent to where I thought. So really, really fascinating. It's one of the questions that we pose to ourselves, and I'm really interested in your thoughts on this. I mean, so again, because like we spoke about before we went live, before we started recording this, that we could probably talk for days and weeks and months on this whole thing, right? But the reality is we've only got a certain amount of time because people's attention spans, X, Y, Z. But I'm really interested to get your thoughts. I mean, so LTIFR, TRIFIR, and I guess we could broaden it to sort of safety metrics. I mean, in your thoughts, in your mind, do you see any potential place for this sort of stuff? I guess in what I call safetyville, and what might that be?
We need to have some idea about what it is we're trying to achieve in safety. If we can't agree on like what safe looks like, then why do we exist? And I think most of us would get to the point of, not killing people is good. And the number of people who get injured is a pretty good measure of what is the outcome we're trying to achieve. But we don't need to overcomplicate that. So, why turn it from a raw number into a rate, except to try to make it look good? If you're hurting 5 people, that's 5 people. Trying to then imagine you get a guesstimate of how many hours you've worked and divide that 5 so that instead of 5, it's 0.78. You've lost information rather than gaining information. If you think that the number's gone up because you've got a higher volume of work that year, then just say that. We injured 5 people this year, 7 people last year, and we think it's probably because we did less work this year. You've lost information when you try to turn that into a ratio and put decimal points behind it.
Yeah, no, great. Now, I don't know, Des, if you want to jump in. Yes, I seem to have taken over the conversation, but anything from you, Des, before I kind of carry on? Because my brain's going at 110 mile an hour here.
Yeah, I think Drew's hit on some really good points, and I just wonder if there's sort of a prevailing belief that things need to be measured in order to be managed. And I would challenge that belief by saying that we manage things daily without measuring them. And maybe safety isn't something that can be managed, that can be measured. It can definitely be managed, but it can't be measured. But we can measure things peripheral to safety. So we can measure what sort of releases of energy we're getting. We can measure the ratio of supervisors to workers and all these periphery things, but we can't actually measure safety itself. And that's why these statistics tend to not function effectively in organizations, is because they're taken to be a measure of safety when they're not actually that. Would that be fair to say?
There are definitely times when you want to measure things to help you get a better understanding of the problem. If I was managing a company and I had no statistical information at all about safety, I wouldn't know where to divert my energy. I might like to know, for example, are we mostly hurting people with minor hand injuries, or are we mostly, should we be worried about back strain? And those sorts of questions are easier to answer with numbers than just with individual stories about incidents. But the reason I picked that particular example is that that's one of the things that we know that TRFIR actually distorts. Is that actually, if you've got TRFIR in place as your overall measure, you tend to get distorted reporting so that you don't know your relative ratios of hand injuries or back strain, because you put perverse incentives into reporting, which tends to accentuate your acute injuries rather than your chronic injuries. So yeah, the point I'm making there is there are good systems of measurement and there are questions when you often want numbers. But when we're doing it in other parts of the business, we don't tend to do it with like standardized every year the exact same statistic. What we tend to do is ask the question first and then go and get the data that matches that particular question. If I want to know whether to be worried about hand injuries or back strain, I should just go out and deliberately count the hand injuries and deliberately count the back strain, do a comparison, and then use that information to make my decision. It's when you just sort of blindly collect almost too much quantitative information that you then are forced to reduce it down to a simplistic number, and then you try to go back out again to answer the questions that you've got. So yeah, it's not a problem with too much focus on quantitative measurement. It's just doing it badly, I think, is the problem here.
Oh, and again, some great insights there. No doubt, I can see Des pondering some really thoughtful conversation there. But I'm going to jump straight into something else, given some time to think about that. So you've touched on quantitative data. I mean, what are your thoughts around qualitative data and how we can maybe better use that potentially to paint us a picture of where we're at and how we're going? I mean, is that something that you think in your mind can be done successfully?
I think so. It depends on what it is you're trying to achieve. So I would be just as worried about a board wanting to micro look through each injury report as I would about a board just caring about the TRFIR. Neither of those are the right sorts of data or conversation to be having at that level. One is too oversimplified, the other is too micromanagey.
Yeah.
And in research, we don't have wars that say, oh, the quantitative researchers don't think all qualitative research is junk, and the qualitative researchers don't think that all quantitative research is junk. Data is data. You want the right data for the type of task that you're doing. If you're the head of safety trying to decide what to prioritize, you need one sort of data. If you're trying to implement a specific workplace improvement, you need a different sort of data. If you're a board trying to get a general sense of whether your systems are working, you need a different sort of data. You got to pick the mix of data that's going to match that particular task. For most things, it's going to be a mix of quantitative and qualitative. Often, quantitative to steer you where to look, and then qualitative to understand it properly.
No, great, and I think you're hitting it on the head there, and I think where we tend to end up with a lot of the conversations that we have, and I guess it's a bit tongue in cheek the way we've kind of started the conversation. Is it good or is it bad, right? But it's really about understanding the context, right? About what is it that you're trying to achieve before you go ahead and decide what it is, right? And I think, and my wonder is, and I'd be interested in your thoughts as a profession. And this is pretty bad of me because I'm painting the whole profession with a brush, right? But do we tend to just go with the easy rather than trying to understand what it is that we're trying to achieve and work out the best mechanism, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, TRFIR, LTIFR, or whatever else we're measuring, just pure numbers? Do we just go with, oh, well, it's copy and paste, so everyone else is doing it, so we'll just do that as well? And I guess that's my wonder is, do you think as an industry we take maybe the easy road and just go, oh, well, everyone else is doing this, we'll all do it as well, and that's how it becomes an industry trend?
How willing are you to insult your listeners, Brenton?
100%, mate. This is not about the listeners. This is let's just insult them. I say go for it.
So let's be honest here, and I would include myself in this. We are not a profession. We are not remotely close to a profession. Right? A profession could be trusted with quantitative data.
Yeah.
Because a profession has the habits of training and education that is capable of working well with quantitative data. I have met hardly any safety people, myself included, who have the required level of statistical training to do business analytics properly. And doing business analytics naively and badly without the training is just going to come up with bad stuff.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I prefer qualitative data is that's what I'm trained in. I trust myself to actually use qualitative data properly. I know how to do that. I know enough about statistics to know when it's being done badly. And what we see in safety is just untrained people trying to do work which requires years of university education to be able to work with data in that sophisticated fashion. There's a reason why accountancy is a degree.
I don't think you're insulting. I think you've hit it on the head, right? And I think I'm assuming Des, I'll let Des speak for himself, but I'm in the same boat, right? And we've had this conversation about the industry as a profession, and I guess what are we and how does that work? And we can't be everything to everybody, right? So so some great ideas there. Des, I mean, what are your thoughts on what Drew's having to say about us as a profession?
I agree wholeheartedly, and I see the exact same thing come up when in the context of reading case law. And just in the last month, I've had a couple of interactions with other safety professionals about or if you can call them that, about their interpretation of case law. And when I read the case, it's just, they've completely missed the point, and it's a complete misreading of the case and absolutely doesn't apply any sort of legal principles like what they're asserting. And yeah, it just comes from a complete lack of knowledge of how to read case law, which, like you said, takes years of university study to get your head around and to become competent at. And I think seems to be a consistent theme running through this whole discussion about just understanding the limitations of metrics and how they should be applied. And I think that could arguably apply across the board with case law and other areas of that safety tends to touch.
Yes, so to swing that around so it's not so insulting, because that was facetious. we do expect safety people to be everything to everyone, right? You know, safety people are one of the rare positions that can be across the whole organization. They're expected to be able to speak to the lawyers. They're expected to be able to do HR stuff. We expected them to be our frontline defense against COVID. We expect them to do like frontline issue management. That sort of expectation, they're not going to, someone who can do all of that is not going to be able to do any of the individual things particularly well. So if you're not going to equip your safety team with an HR legal expert and a business analytics expert and a frontline investigations expert, and then give all of those people extra training in safety so that they understand the context, if we're not going to put those resources in, then I think safety people are going to always be underskilled for whatever particular task is in front of them in the moment. And that takes quite a sophisticated level of personal humility to know that you're a bit out of your depth, to know that you still need to add value, and working out how you can responsibly add some sort of input without going beyond your bounds of expertise. And when we try to do like complex statistics like injury rates, that's, I think, pushing people beyond what we could reasonably expect them to know how to manage and analyze that well.
Oh, well, you've blocked out the whole day for this, hey, Drew, because we could keep going. I've got hopefully this is going to be a quick question, but never seems to be when I ask them. Do you think it's a them problem or an us problem? And what I mean by that is, do you think it's a them problem as in people that utilize our services are expecting too much of us? Or do you think it's an us problem where we think we should be doing or knowing more than we know? I'm really interested to get your thoughts on that around the profession. We'll just keep calling it a profession for now. But, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think we can overgeneralize, because the profession doesn't have strict boundaries around it. So, there are safety practitioners who have master's degrees in safety, along with master's degrees in engineering, who are doing engineering style safety work. There are safety people with MBAs who are doing detailed business analytics style work. It's the fact that as a profession, we don't have good labels and qualifications. So a business really doesn't know what you're getting with a safety person. And then you get a chicken and egg problem where they then think they can just appoint anyone and that anyone then is expected to do the job. So, they're basically forced to act outside of their training and expertise. So I don't think you can blame an individual and say, okay, this person's too big for their boots, they're doing the wrong thing. If they've been appointed for the job by the business and they're expected to do it, of course, they're just going to do the best that they can.
Yeah, wow. Cool. That's some great insights. So I got a bit distracted. I like the way you're obviously a seasoned podcast kind of person, because you clearly keep bringing it back to data and statistics, which was the nature of this call. I'm like I was talking to Des yesterday. I'm a little bit like a cocker spaniel, really. I get a bone and I'm off and I'm bouncing around the place. So thanks for bringing us back to centering it. Kind of got another sort of question for you, and we'll see where this one sort of goes. So there's obviously a number of pitfalls with using data like TRIFIR or LTIFR or anything statistical, as we've kind of been touching on. I mean, do you see any, I guess, opportunity for the use of it? And how would you suggest that if people are, again, if the business is saying we need to use this data, is there any kind of, I don't know, advice, guidance, thoughts you'd give to individuals that are being forced to use this metric because that's what the business is asking for? And no matter how many times, they bang their fist on the desk, no one's listening, no one wants to change because everybody else is doing it. What would you be saying to those individuals that have to use it and how best to go about using it?
I think the biggest concept that is hard for people new to statistics to fully understand is the idea of variability. When we're teaching statistics at university level, this is one of those threshold concepts that people, once they get it, they just move into a whole new realm of understanding. I'm not going to be able to explain variability in a captured way that's going to suddenly transform people's thinking here. You basically
tried last week with something like this or something. I don't know what he was doing, but
yes. So basically, this is the idea that numbers go up and down without reasons. And if you can just get into your head that when a number goes down, that might not have any reason behind it at all. It's just like rolling a dice. You roll a dice, sometimes it's a 1, sometimes it's a 6. And if it's a 6 last year and a 1 this year, that doesn't mean you're suddenly rolling a 20-sided dice. It just means that a different number came up. And once you get that idea, you just stop saying things like, we've got fewer injuries than last year. Because that's a meaningless statement.
Yeah, great.
If you're going to work with numbers, you've got to understand what the variability is and whether what you're looking at represents just natural variability or whether what you're looking at represents a difference in reporting or whether what you're looking at represents an actual change in the underlying mechanics that are generating those numbers. And mostly that's what the science of statistics is about untangling those things rather than just sitting in a meeting speculating, the number's gone down. Is that because of increased reporting? There are ways of telling that, of analyzing the dance or natural or like some underlying process change. And basically, unless you are confident that you can work those things out by doing the maths, then don't make claims using statistics. Like statistics is not for you yet. Your time is better spent understanding how statistics works than it is playing with the particular numbers in front of you.
Yeah, no. What was running through my head there while you're talking about that is my wonder is has technology kind of try to oversimplify things? Because these days you can, and I wonder if we're expecting more and thinking things are easier to explain than they really are. Like every bit of software you buy these days provides you with dashboards, and everybody talks about dashboards, and it's all color coded and it looks beautiful and stuff. My wonder is have we try to oversimplify the use of numbers, and therefore people are thinking everything's got to have a rhyme or a reason, I guess, is a bit of a disjointed thoughts coming from me.
Yeah, we crossed that point when Excel let you just do a graph of your data and stick a trend line through it.
Yeah. And it's just getting easier and easier, right? And these days you could probably throw numbers into ChatGPT and it'll do it for you, right?
Yeah, I don't know the particular answer to that, but I would say though that some of that stuff does mean that so long as you do understand the concepts, you can do things like basic statistical testing now without needing to be able to do all of the maths yourself. So that should be a good thing, right? So long as you understand that what you actually need to do is a significance test. You can't just compare two numbers. You need to compare whether that difference is significant. And you need to understand, fundamentally understand what significance is. That it's, the moment I hear someone saying oh, it's not statistically significant, but as if, the statistical significance is just this weird academic thing that doesn't really matter. if something's not statistically significant, that means that the change you're seeing is not real, right? What you're looking at is just a random variation, or at least you can't know whether or not it's just a random variation.
Yeah.
And so, once you really intuit some of those concepts about why we do statistical testing, if you've got that, then yeah, the technology is good because the technology lets you run those tests nice and easily. And it lets you run the same test in 4 different ways very quickly just to check whether the result is an artifact of the particular way you did the test.
Yeah.
Or whether there's likely to be something real going on.
No,
so no, I wouldn't blame the technology. The technology is actually helpful.
Yes. No, great. Des, before I ask Drew, probably one of the most hard-hitting questions that I've come up with. Anything from you on what you're talking about?
Last week in the show, I explained really poorly the idea of applying a confidence interval. And I just thought of another example while Drew was talking, where I was involved with an organization that was interested in LTI frequency rates. And I was also undertaking an injury management initiative, seeking to get people on a return to work plan if they had the medical capacity to do so. And of course, our lost time injury frequency rate plummeted as a result because people were no longer losing time. They were back at work. And this was interpreted as, oh, aren't we doing great in the safety space? And it actually had nothing to do with us being any safer. It had everything to do with us managing the other end of the spectrum, the other end of the injury, post-injury management. So there's some real issue there around understanding the limitations of those numbers and what they actually mean. I was just thinking of that while Drew spoke, but
yeah, that's a great example though of where numbers are actually useful. Was your return to work program doing its job? What would be the best count for that? The number of lost days is actually probably a really good metric for the success of your return to work program. And you can use those numbers to show that it's a success. You know what's going on there. You have reduced the number of lost days by getting people back to work quicker. Good job, both in the program itself and in the data you're using. That sounds like a success case and evidence that we shouldn't just throw out the numbers, that the numbers can actually represent something, so long as we do understand what we're doing as an organization and where that's likely to be changing the numbers and what's an appropriate way to measure it.
And I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier, Drew, too. It's around that contextualization, right? So understanding what is the question I'm trying to answer here with these numbers, and what is that data actually showing me? So contextualization, I think, is so important. Now, Drew, you possibly don't realize this, but both Des and I work in construction, and often we have to go, cap in hand when tendering for a job, and say, we get asked lots of questions of us, and we've got to go back and say, yep, here's all the data. What would your advice be to say? Not that we're looking for free consulting here, but what would your advice be to someone like Des or myself, where we're trying to convince a client that, listen, maybe these metrics aren't the best metrics, but they've got it in their head that the whole safety profession uses LTIFR and TRIFIR. What would be some of the things you'd kind of use to try and sell it to the client that maybe they're not the best metrics to be looking at?
I doubt that you can at that point. There is something weird going on in New Zealand institutionally with pre-qualification for tenders, because it's not just that everyone in New Zealand complains about it, it's that it's particularly people in New Zealand that complain about it. So there's obviously an increased incentive for the principal contractors or for the government departments that are sitting on top of that to feel responsibility for making sure that the people that they're recruiting or accepting the tenders have good safety, but for also not wanting to do that themselves, for wanting to just outsource it as a simple package. And then you've in turn got incentive for the companies that do this to standardize and so I think you need to attack the problem at that level, that the moment the person running the tender has outsourced to a contract pre-qualification service, you've lost the game. There's nothing that you as an individual person tendering can do about that. You've really got to work on what's the tender that's coming up in a few years' time, not the one that you're trying to respond to right now.
Yeah, great. I mean, that's some great advice. And I know the Right Honourable Minister Brooke Van Velden is currently going through a bit of a health and safety review of our legislation. Maybe we can convince her that we should, maybe make some changes in that space. But no, that's been fantastic. Just I guess as we start to sort of wrap up this week conversation, because again, we could probably drag this on for days, weeks, and months. I mean, Des, any sort of final thoughts from you on this topic, having had this great conversation with Drew?
Yeah, I think building on Drew's point, I don't think we're going to see this idea of LTIFRs and TRIFRs being conflated with the idea of whether you're safe or not going away anytime soon. I think it's too much of a copy and paste exercise that's just going to continue for as long as safety will be around, just because people don't understand the limitations of it. They don't understand the application of it.
No, great. And awesome. Just Drew, just over to you, mate. Just as we sort of wrap up this conversation, I mean, any sort of final words of wisdom, guidance, oracle-like, kind of experience on the topic?
I'll throw in a plug for the ongoing work that my PhD candidate, Kevin Geddert, is working on. He has the idea that the easiest fix to the problem is to build in a measure of severity so that we have a severity-weighted index rather than a binary reportable or not reportable. So you're going to be seeing some work coming out over the next couple of years that is explaining why that approach might work, and some actual candidate metrics that can be used that incorporate severity. We're not going to get rid of TRIFIR, but maybe putting those in as well and alongside will paint a different picture and start to show some of the stuff that TRIFIR is missing. We probably can't get rid of it, but we can put something else next to it that at least puts it in a bit more context.
And take it back more towards, by the sounds of it, potentially back to its original roots, right? And what it was initially maybe intended on being, which is I guess potentially a good thing, right? I mean, look at bell bottoms; they came back, right? And that was awesome. I mean, Crocs, they've done a whole life cycle, and that was great as well. Des, don't shake your head at me like that. That's you're a fan of Crocs, mate. Drew, quick question for you: are you a Croc fan or are you a slides guy?
I think you're speaking some sort of weird New Zealand lingo at me, Brenton. I will say, if you're trying to dispel the notion that all safety is just fads and fashions, I think you're right.
Wow. Well, you know me so well after 38 minutes. That's brilliant. No, listen, Drew, really just want to, again, thank you for your time. I think you've brought some great insight in some of the conversations that we're having. You've really helped us kind of, I know for myself, in fact, come to some realizations and grounded some of the stuff that we talked about last week. So really appreciate your time coming on and joining us.
It's a pleasure, Des and Brenton.
Excellent. Well, thanks to hopefully everyone else out got there, and no doubt we'll keep an eye out on that, some of that great work that's going to be coming out of your office over the next couple of years, and hopefully it takes us to a whole other level. And we start using this. Let's live in hope that we start using this data as to help us do what we need to do. So until the next time, thanks heaps, and catch you soon.
Before we wrap up, Brent, I think we should encourage listeners to head across to the Safety Work podcast if they haven't already. It's proven a very, very valuable resource for me.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Maybe what we'll do is we'll put a link in the LinkedIn post just below this. So jump on over and join in. And I think the more, and that's what this is all about for us too, Drew, is about just really drowning understanding in some of the theories that we're talking about. And I guess the more people listen to different aspects of it and different viewpoints on things, they're going to get a far more grounded approach to what we do. Brilliant. Well, we'll catch you all soon.
Thank you. See ya.